grab a Bible. Go back to Titus and grab your listening guide, lay it down there. Do you realize you'll spend more time at work than you will anywhere else? 50 to 70% of waking hours, you're at work. And some of you sleep at work, so I guess that would even change that. I mean, think about how much time you spend at work. And what if that became game day? I'm going to correct a misnomer. You've heard us say and that Sunday's game day, you know, man, this is it. We come and we worship and we learn and all. This is not game day. This is a huddle where we talk about from the playbook, hey, what's the play? And there comes a moment when we break the huddle here and go to work tomorrow to run the play that we learned about. I mean, thousands and thousands of people yesterday filled stadiums across this country not to watch somebody huddle. They filled stadiums to watch somebody run a play and somebody score a touchdown and somebody win a game. That's what it's about. That's what we are about. And this is not the game. This is the huddle. And in a little bit, we're going to break this huddle and we're going to walk out the door and we're going to go and eat somewhere, and there's going to be a server that needs our love. There's going to be somebody in our life that needs a little encouragement. There's going to be somebody that cuts us off in the parking lot. We're going to need to pray a blessing over them. There's going to be somebody that just gets in our way. We're going to need to evidence and manifest the Spirit of grace. And then we're going to go to work tomorrow, some of you tonight. And you're going to get to live out the play that our eternal Father has called for His people. Now let's talk about work from this perspective. 3 perspectives on work. One is a secular perspective. That means work is just work. It's making a money. It's building houses and buying all kinds of stuff. And God doesn't have a lot to do with it. You're just on your own. Get out there and get it and have at it. That's a secular view of work. Most of those who do not follow Christ will embrace that because they think that the goal of life is how much you can get. There's a second view of work that's basically compartmentalizing your life. It's the split view of work. It means, well, I go to church on Sunday, that's my spiritual life. And then I go to work on Monday, that's my secular life. And so I have my life neatly divided into 2 categories. One is spiritual, one is secular. One is things that have to do with God. The other is just things that have to do with the world and everything else. That is crazy. You got that from Plato. You did not get that from the Bible. There is a Platonic dualism that has been around forever. It's as old as the Greek philosophers, but it is not biblical. You do not have 2 parts of your life. You do not have a spiritual and a secular. You got one life, and it's lived under the lordship of Jesus Christ. That's all you got. It's lived under the Almighty. So every day, every breath you breathe is divine. Every cell in your body is divine. It's sacred. There's nothing in your life that's secular. Nothing. Why? Because you are created in the image of God. So therefore, everything about you is sacred. Everything about you has divinity. Everything about you is His. So we don't divide it up. And so Christians sometimes will go to church and they'll come and they'll live one way on Sunday, and then they go to work and they act entirely different. But I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten from somebody saying, does so-and-so go to your church? That's always a setup, man. I'm always worried about the next line. Yes, they do. Well, let me tell you what they did at work. And then I'll hear some horrendous story of somebody who couldn't understand that every day belongs to God, not just Sunday. Every facet of their life is under the lordship of Jesus, not just Sunday. I remember when I was in Texas pastoring, there was a church, a big church actually. Not this big, but it was a big church. And the pastor was bivocational, which means he had another job to kind of support his family. The other job was a realtor. He was a realtor. And so a news story broke about this guy. What he was doing is, some of you realtors know exactly what I'm talking about. When he would list a house, he would go in the house, especially obviously if they moved out and everybody was gone, he would go in and take light fixtures and resell them or he would use them himself. Or he'd go in and take appliances out. So when he showed the house, he goes, whoops, they took the appliances, or somebody took the light fixtures. And so basically he was stealing. Well, the story broke, and they convicted him. And so the Fort Worth Star-Telegram interviews this guy. And this is the question they ask him. Don't you preach on Sunday? Don't you pastor a church? He said, yeah. Well, how do you preach on Sunday and pastor a church on Sunday, and then you do something like this during the week? I'll quote him. What I have to do on Sunday has nothing to do with what I have to do the rest of the week. Are you kidding me? What you do on Sunday has nothing to do with what you do the rest of the week? And that's what he meant. It's exactly what he said, and he meant it. That's the problem with the church. That's why we've lost our influence. That's why the salt and light has become nil. Why? Because we don't realize that what we do on Sunday has everything to do with the rest of the week. It's running the place, so our life is not divided into the secular and to the sacred. And then the last view would just be what I call the biblical view. What is the biblical view of work? And I'll tell you what the biblical view is. God made it. God designed us for work. And if you look in your listening guide, the three things, work was and is a part of God's design for us. It's how He built us. It's how He created this place. In fact, look at Genesis 1:28. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and, what's the word? Subdue. Now, you notice that word is underlined in your listening guide, and I want you to write this out beside that word. The word in Hebrew is kabosh. You don't have to write that, but here's what I want you to know. That is a word that means take the earth and bring something from it. Make it produce. It's a word that was used in the Hebrew to talk about take the earth, take the resources, and make something of it. Most interpreters and most scholars will tell you that is the first reference to work in the Bible. And I believe it. I think Wayne Grudem is one of them, and I believe he's exactly right. So how many verses in are we? How many verses in the Bible does the idea of work appear? 28 verses. And God has given us a commission, and He says, go and multiply. And some of you are doing great with that. You're doing real well. Don't need to encourage you and coach you up on that one. And what? Subdue. That means produce. So evidently God designed it that way. You know what I hear all the time? Well, work is the result of the fall. Work is the result of the curse. No, it isn't. There's nothing in the Bible that says that work is the result of the curse. Now, there is something in the Bible about work being hard because of the curse. Work being really, really tough and by the sweat of our brow and with thorns and thistles. I mean, yes, the curse messed up everything. But you know what else is hard? Relationships. Marriage is hard because of the curse. Everything is hard because of the curse. But it doesn't mean it's wrong. Work is ordained by God. He created it. And so God has designed it in such a way. In fact, God's working today. Once in a while I hear people say, well, God's resting now, isn't He? No, He isn't. Where'd you get the idea He's resting? Well, He rested on the seventh day. He rested on the seventh day. It's past the seventh day. Yes, He rested on the seventh day because it was the Sabbath, and He honored the Sabbath principle that He gave us later. But guess what? He went back to work. What's He doing? I'll tell you what He's doing. Ephesians 2:8-10 says that you are His workmanship. Really? He's working on you. Philippians 1:6 says, I'm confident that He who began a good work in you, He's going to continue it. So you know what God's doing today? He's working on you. And some of you, you are a challenge. God is working hard. I'm telling you, it's a chore, but God's working. So today, you and I must back up and go, God, if you ordained it, if you created us this way, and if you are working, then that must mean there's never a day when we retire. Right. Did you hear me? The word retirement is not here. Now, it's okay to quit a career. It's okay to walk away from an 8 to 5. But don't quit working. Don't quit doing something. There's dignity in that. That's how God wired you. It's how God created you. As one friend was sharing with another one, he was going to quit. He said, man, when I retire, I'm going to go home. I'm going to sit on the couch and watch TV all day or play golf all day long. And his other friend said, you're going to die. And he said, well, maybe so. I said, no, you're going to die. Either you're going to die from lack of purpose or your wife's going to kill you. One of the two, you're going to die. And the truth of that is this. You will die. Because you weren't built to do nothing. You were built to work. Let me tell you who my generation is. My generation is the generation called the boomers. We are the largest generation that this planet has seen. We have the greatest music, the 70s music, the greatest music that this world has ever known. Right? Can I get a witness? All the boomers out there? Yeah. And listen, y'all take that 90s music and that 80s stuff, but give me the 70s, right? Let me tell you, we are the largest group. And guess what's happening to us right now? We're starting to retire. You know what that means? We're going to have a bunch of folks, the largest army in the world, sitting around wondering, what am I supposed to do? I got a clue. Keep working. No. Not out there with a job that you've got to take somebody else's place. Somebody else needs that job. But let me tell you this, keep working. What if you just changed your work? And what if you just said, you know what, now I can serve the kingdom in a whole nother way. I've been serving the kingdom in my work, but I'm going to serve the kingdom in another way. I'm going to go to church and volunteer. I'm going to get involved in a ministry. Let me tell you, there's an organization in town called Wycliffe Bible Translators. I think it's one of the greatest organizations we have as Great Commission people. They're unbelievable in what they're able to do and give us the languages, the Bible in the languages of the people. They have a program called Wycliffe Associates. Are any of you in this room a part of Wycliffe Associates? There were several in the first service, may not be many of that age. Back in the back, right back there. She can tell you exactly what I'm talking about. This is one of the coolest armies of people you'll ever see. In the winter months here in Orlando, in the winter, you will see a city of campers, motorhomes. I mean, they come from everywhere. And you know who they are? They're folks who've retired from a career that say, hey, I'm not through. What can I do? And they've given them a job. And they come alongside Wycliffe Associates to help them. They're called, or come on Wycliffe, they're called associates. They're just there to serve. So I've been sitting around thinking, man, that sounds like a great idea. And then all of a sudden, something started happening here. I had a retired guy show up in my office the other day. He just retired. He came in and sat down. He looked at me. He's in great health. He said, David, I've retired. And he was well up in his company. He had done very, very well. He said, I've retired. I'm not going to work. In a couple of weeks, for the first time, I'm not showing up at my job, but I'm ready to go to work now. And I said, what do you mean? He said, what do you need? You asking me? What do you need? Pastor, I'm ready to go to work for my church, for my Lord. What can I do? Then the week after that, another man came in. Same story. Hey, I'm retiring from my career. What can I do? See, guys, I just envision, and we may call them associates. I don't know. We're working on a plan. By the way, the first guy that came in, I looked at him and said, I tell you what you can do for me. Help build me a program that'll use people just like you. Can you do it? You're in management. Yeah. I'd be delighted to do it. So you know what he's working on right now? He's working on a plan that people in this church, when they retire and have some time, they can show up and say, what do you need me to do? And they become a part of the force, the team here. Because what you may not realize, if we paid everybody to do everything this church does, we would never make it. We have an army of volunteers that are just serving. They're doing incredible things. So wouldn't it be cool if when you retire from your occupation, then you just keep working for the glory of God somewhere else in your church, in a ministry out there. Maybe it's a partner that we work with. Maybe it's Frontline. Maybe it's, a Christian Service Center, one of them. So I'm just saying that the Bible doesn't know a time without work. I think we're going to work in heaven. I think it's going to be in heaven. We're going to work. We're going to do something. I don't think we float around on a cloud with a harp with a sheet on. I think we're going to have this incredible life that's going to be productive. I think we may be having a garden in heaven. We may be growing our own. I don't know. I can tell you this. I had a guy come up to me the other day, and he's retiring, and he said, Pastor, I used to love to plant things. What if we were to have a garden somewhere up here, and we grow things, and we take the food from it, serve it over in the cafe or over in Faith Hall, or we give it to the poor? I said, are you serious about that? He said, I'd love to do something like that. I said, that's a great dream. It's crazy, but I like that thinking. And I believe that's what God calls us to as a biblical view of work. It's what we're to do all of our days. So, number one, God created it. It was and is a part of His design. Number two, work is an instrument that God uses to make us more like Him. I'll tell you what God's doing in your work. That person that is in the cubicle next to you that you cannot stand them, God is showing you how to love like Jesus. That supervisor that's driving you crazy, that's just unbelievably tough on you, God is using them to make you more like Christ. I believe God uses work and the challenges of work to shape our life. So when you go back to work tomorrow, I want you to go the meanest person that you work with. And I want you to walk up and say, hey, my pastor said thank you. Because you're making me a lot more like Jesus. Just wanted you to know, he said thank you. So do I. I'm telling you, it worked. It happens. You know, we got those people out there, right? Man, you ought to see who I have to work with. Well, never mind. There are people that challenge us. So see, God uses them. That's a way He uses work as a tool, as an instrument. And then the last thing, I just think it's an incredible canvas for God to display His grace. And that moves me to this. Look at the text. I want you to go to Titus chapter 2, verse 9. Slaves are to be submissive to their own masters in everything. They're to be well-pleasing, not argumentative, not pilfering, but showing all good faith, so that in everything they may adorn the doctrine of God our Savior. I know that these verses start with the word slave, but you probably have a footnote in your Bible. The footnote down at the bottom will say something like it could be translated bondservant or servant. Well, let me tell you another category. There are 5 categories that Paul addresses in the opening chapters of Titus. This is the 5th category of people. This one's not gender-based. This is not based on age. This one is based on status. This is the word I've chosen to write the word worker above the word slave. Because you know who the workforce was in the Roman world? Slaves. 60 million of them. And isn't it interesting that Paul doesn't say, okay, those of you that are in a slavery position, go out there and stand on the street corner with a sign and protest. No. He said, go out there and live like Jesus in some of the hardest circumstances that there are. I know some of you in this room can identify with the word slave because you feel like one at work. But I want you to look at the principles that He gave them, and I think you can apply them to you. And I've chosen this morning to equate the two and to draw the parallels and to draw the principles of what does a follower of Christ look like at work. Now, some of you are business owners, but the truth is you worked for somebody at some point. And my encouragement to you would be this: never forget what it feels like to be a worker. I had a man one time say, you'll know when you have the attitude of a servant is by how you act when you're treated like one. So some of you business owners, hear me on this. Don't ever forget what it's like. Don't ever forget what it's like to work on that assembly line. Don't ever forget what it's like to work for that minimum wage. Don't ever forget that. And the same profile you'll see here for the worker applies to the owners. So with that said, what does a follower of Christ look like at work? And I'm going to use the verbs that are in verse 9 and 10. The verbs. Number 1, submissive. And notice in your listening guide that I have the Greek word for you, hupotasso. That's the very word that is used often in the Scripture for following the commands of someone or following the leadership of someone. And so the first thing he says back in verse 9, slaves are to be submissive to their own masters, or in your case, it'd be supervisor or whoever's in authority over you. And the word submissive means just that. Follow them. You say, but I don't agree. No buts. Don't be a but in this. Do exactly what he said. But I don't, no. Be submissive. Do you know who Paul's talking to? He's talking to slaves of Romans. Now, I know they weren't Sunday school teachers. They were pagan people. And yet Paul is saying, you as a follower of Christ, listen, quit fighting. Do what they say. Because there's a witness in that. And you know what else? I think when you can learn to submit to a supervisor that's tough, it will help you submit to God when you don't understand Him. There is a relationship in submission, whether it be to an earthly authority or to one who is in heaven. So he said the first thing, submit to Him. The second quality, well-pleasing. This is very interesting. The word well-pleasing, in everything they are to be well-pleasing. It is one word in the Greek. It is a word that is almost always used of God, meaning well-pleasing to God. So I think the way it ought to be interpreted is this. You ought to work your job as if you were doing it for Him. You ought to do it as if you were doing it for Jesus. In fact, let me ask you a question. If Jesus were your supervisor, would your attitude be different at work? Well, guess what? Jesus is your supervisor. So you might want to change your attitude tomorrow. He is your supervisor. You're doing it for Him. Well-pleasing just means, God, I want to honor you in this. It's really hard for me. I don't like this. I don't like the job I got. I don't like the people I have to work with. But you know what? I like you. And I'm going to do this for you until you open another door for me to do something else. I just think Paul over and over said, whatever you do, do all for the glory of God. And here it is. Do it for Him. Do it for His glory. Number 3, don't argue. Not argumentative. That is a word, antilego. It's actually 2 words. Anti meaning against. Lego is the verb to speak. So if you put it together, what do you get? Quit arguing. Let me tell you where I think followers of Christ get into more trouble in the workplace. Their mouth. Their mouth. You know why? Because you think God needs your help to save the day. And God needs your help to bring judgment on the pagans. And so you stand in the break room and preach judgment and hell and damnation. That is not helping the cause of Christ. The Bible calls us to be very careful with our mouth. Because see, what you don't understand is God's a lot bigger than your mouth. He's a lot stronger than your mouth. He doesn't need your mouth. So Paul calls these slaves, don't be argumentative. Don't be walking around. And let me tell you something. Don't raise your hand on this, but how many of us in this room struggle with this? And I use the pronoun us for a reason. I'm terrible. I was terrible at this. I mean, I still struggle. When people come in and, you know, there's a problem or there's an issue with, man, I want to argue, I want to fight, I want to defend. And the Lord just said, shh. Man, don't you wish every once in a while, just like that moment, I can't believe I thought of this. But the movie Dumb and Dumber, at that moment, whenever she's saying something, he puts his finger up. Anyway, never mind. Just a random thought there. Don't you wish God could come down? I mean, when we're about to say something really stupid, God could just reach out of the heavens and go, don't argue. Why? Because it's really a bad witness. They know you go to church. They know you're a Christian. And let me just tell you in a negative way, be careful stories you tell. Is the break room licensed for you to be telling the same stories everybody else does? Laughing at the same inappropriate humor? Shh. Just don't go there. You're a follower of Christ. You're not like everybody else in that break room. So don't be argumentative. And then don't pilfer. This is very interesting. Not pilfering, verse 10. The word pilfer is actually the word embezzle. Now, that sounds drastic. I'll be honest, everybody in the room is going, I don't embezzle. I don't embezzle. Well, wait a minute. Hang on. If you take this word and you look a little deeper, it actually means take something that's not yours. Take something that's not yours. Let me ask you a question. Do not raise your hand. I guess confession is good for the soul, but have you ever used company time to do something personal that really wasn't about the company? You might want to look at that word. Have you ever taken something home, a laptop, something else, used it for personal reasons, and you know it was against policy? Have you ever not turned in the exactly accurate expense report? Now I'm getting a lot closer to your zip code, right? This is not just embezzlement. This is not walking with integrity. And he's calling these servants in the Roman world, and he calls us to a higher standard. He says, hey, if you're a follower of Christ, don't take things from the company that don't belong to you. Don't take their time. Don't take their things. Respect that company. And then he says, the next one, showing all good faith. Showing all good faith. You know, what's interesting about that is, and I believe it's right. Most commentators will tell you that the showing of good faith, the word faith is pistis, and then, of course, showing is a word that means to demonstrate. I don't think it's showing good faith about God. I think it's showing good faith in the people you work for. I think it's loyalty. Write the word loyalty. I really believe this, and it's because of the construction, but it's also because he's already addressed the issue of doing it for God. I think this is just loyalty. I think you ought to, as a follower of Christ, ought to be the most loyal employee your company has. You ought to be the most loyal. Why? Because they're paying you, and you're a witness. So you say, you know what? I'm going to be loyal. And I'm going to do everything I can to show good faith. And all of this, everything, what is the product of work? Everything he's just described. Why would we do that? Why would we want to live that way or work that way? And here's the reason. Not so our check is bigger, not so we get a promotion. You know what it is? Read the last part of verse 10. This is absolutely amazing to me. So that, it's a purpose clause, so that in everything they may adorn the doctrine of God our Savior. Now they, meaning workers. God wants us to live and work in a certain way that we may adorn the doctrine of God. You know what the word adorn is in the Greek? I'm going to say it in the Greek and see if you hear an English word. Kosmeo is the verb, adorn. Ladies, did you hear another word in that? Kosmeo? Cosmetic. So let's talk about this for a second. What does he mean when we work with that kind of character? We adorn the doctrine of God. What do you typically use cosmetics for? Cover up. It's not that. It means to display with beauty. It means to draw attention to appropriately. I'll give you a little inside baseball. You know the wedding was this weekend, and you know for weddings they bring in, what are they called? These ladies that do that for a living, they makeup artists? Thank you. They bring in the makeup artist and all, and Rachel, I'm texting her, I'm running errands, she's running errands, and I text her and said, how are you doing? And she said, I'm doing all right, I'm just behind, and I don't think I'm going to be able to go out there and get all the makeup stuff and my hair done and all. I think I'm just going to do what I always do. And I texted her back, Rachel, you don't need all that stuff. You just need to let your beauty shine through. Now, did I get points for that? Yes, I did. Did I do it for points? No. Because I was trying to say to her, just, you're beautiful. Just let it come through. When you work with an attitude like he just described, you just let his beauty come through. You don't cover up something. It's already there. Even in those of you that work in a real hard job. Let me show you this. Can I borrow your ring? That's a great looking ring. Rachel, you like that? Maybe we could work. If you go to the jeweler and you say, I want to look at a ring like this, I promise you they will not take this ring and just lay it on a piece of glass or on the countertop. No. They'll come out and do this number right here. And they'll take that and they'll lay it up against that. Because anytime you put a ring like this, let me get the smooth part. Anytime you get a ring like this, you put it on a black piece or velvet or blue, dark, whatever. And I'm telling you, a ring like that, when you put it up against that dark, it pops. This is your job. It's dark. It's not always fun. It's hard. This is Jesus in you. And I believe the reason he's placed you where you are in a hard place is to show off the beauty of who he is in you. In fact, the word cosmeo, did you know in the ancient times it was actually used of arranging a necklace or arranging jewels in such a way that they sparkle and they're the brightest? That's what God's doing in every one of us. When he places you at your job, you are to live this way. Why? So that, man, when they look at you, oh my goodness, they see it because the backdrop is not that beautiful. But they see your life and you adorn the doctrine of God. You make it attractive. John MacArthur was right. Thank you. John MacArthur was right. He said it's not our programs that attract people to our faith. It's not our buildings that attract people to our faith. You know what it is? It's our lives. It's your life at work. It's the way you live at work that attracts people. Every story last week, 2 weeks ago, my goodness, when we were baptizing people, it was this, well, they brought me to Christ, and they brought me to Christ, and they brought me to Christ, or they helped me. And it was all in the context of work. So what if we today were to say, okay, I'm going to serve somebody at work. I'm going to go back to work. I'm going to have a different attitude, and I'm going to ask God to show me somebody that I need to go after, to minister to, or really try to help them. Our whole theme is serving. What if we were to just say, God, I want to serve at work, so would you show me how? And let me tell you what happened in the first service. In the first service, we had people coming, and they were saying things like this. Pastor, you need to pray for me because I haven't had a good attitude. I've been real argumentative with a supervisor. And I realize I've harmed the witness of Christ. One came and said, I'm in a really hard job. It's very, very hard. Guys, I have no idea where you work, and I have no idea what it's like where you work. I just know this. He does. And I believe with all my heart, if you ask him to make you a worker just like this text we just read, that God is going to put that diamond up where people can see it. And you are going to adorn and make beautiful our God. You're going to display him in that hard place. If that's your desire, I want us to bow together. As we bow together right now, every head bowed, if that's your desire, I want you in just a moment, you feel the freedom to come and kneel at this altar or just come and stand and say, God, I want you to use me at work. I want you to use me at work. I want you to change my work environment by changing me. God, I want you to help me to see people that I need to minister to, that I need to serve. Father, I really believe with all my heart, if we were in this room, if we really were to begin to see our work as a mission field and we were to live the lives that you've described in your word, we would adorn the doctrine of God. We would make famous your name. We'd be like a billboard. And faith in our church and all that we believe would be so attractive to our coworkers. So that's what we ask. In Jesus' name.